We're unlike a lot of other trade associations, that do mostly marketing. We actually provide tile industry leadership in the development of standards, initiatives with the government. Of course, we promote the industry, but we also are involved a lot, as we'll get to, I'm sure, in sustainability initiatives and also technical publications.
Well, hello, Bill Griese. We're so excited to have you on the podcast today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about TCNA.
Sure, happy to. As you said, Christy, my name is Bill Griese. I'm happy to be here this afternoon. Thank you for the invite. My organization, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Tile Council of North America, TCNA. We're a trade association representing manufacturers in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, manufacturers of ceramic tile, of course, but also pretty much anything related to ceramic tile. So tile installation materials, tile tooling. If you're manufacturing in the U.S., Canada, or Mexico, chances are you're a member of our organization. We represent over 99% of the industry in North America, with offices and laboratories in the U.S. and Mexico. So as a trade association, we're unlike a lot of other trade associations, that do mostly marketing. We actually provide tile industry leadership in the development of standards, initiatives with the government. Of course, we promote the industry, but we also are involved a lot, as we'll get to, I'm sure, in sustainability initiatives and also technical publications. So we do a lot for the industry. We were established as TCA, the Tile Council of America, in 1945. Our roots go back much further than that, into the late 1800s, in the business of being an association for manufacturers. But today, our offices are in Clemson, are actually in Anderson, South Carolina, located in the Clemson University Research Park. That's where we operate our state-of-the-art laboratory, which provides revenue for the association for sure, but also provides an opportunity to engage in research towards product development, quality assurance, but also research towards the development of standards. The reason we're here in Clemson at the research park is through our joint facilities use agreement with Clemson University. So by having that relationship with academia, it brings a lot of immediate benefits, but also obvious benefits. For sure, the access to research capabilities, faculty, and equipment, but also, access to academia when we start talking about career opportunities for the industry, engaging with students. In fact, a large percentage of our staff here at TCNA are materials engineers from Clemson, and also microbiologists and business majors as well. So we have a lot of good synergy here on campus. That's why we're here. But we've really grown as an organization throughout the years. We're rooted in standards and technical work. And we're secretariat of the ANSI A108 committee, which is over pretty much every U.S. tile standard. We have equivalents in Mexico as well. ASTM International, the International Standards Development Organization, ISO, as well as the TCNA Handbook, which is referred to by virtually every specifier, designer, tile installer, you name it. So a lot of work in the standards world, but also a lot of work in advocacy too, in terms of trade, in terms of health and safety criteria, and so forth. So yeah, pretty much, I could go on and on and on. But
Well, it is interesting, like even as you were saying, it came about, to have this type of a company that has the standards aspect to it, just to make sure that it's meeting standards, there's safety components and sustainability components. Is there like in the history of it, is there anything that really kind of happened that motivated this company to come into being? I mean, what was there an issue or an incident, or what do you know about that? I'm just curious.
I don't know that I can speak accurately to the exact genesis of our standards development involvement. I do know it's always been an industry that is rooted in standards and in quality. A lot of our work in the world of installation and convening installers, manufacturers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. We really facilitate the development of standards, and that's one of our strengths. Always has been one of our strengths: the ability to bring all stakeholders together to agree on important issues, build consensus around these issues. So I don't know about the exact genesis. We've pretty much, as far as I've been around and long before, have been rooted in standards, though.
So what got you interested in being in this type of an industry? How did you get started in this?
Well, I'm a ceramic engineer from Clemson, which is right here on the campus. And by a stroke of luck, one summer when I was in school, my dad told me to get my butt off the couch and get a job. And I happened to see an email from Mr. Noah Chitty, who many in the industry know, who was our lab manager here at the time, looking for a summer intern. And so that's really it. That's my story. I've been here ever since. I'm a ceramic engineer from Clemson, started here in the lab, and then got more heavily involved in standards development. And now I'm kind of involved in a little bit of everything here at TCNA.
So now you've opened up another can of worms, Bill. So ceramic engineer, because literally that is the first time I've ever heard of that. So what does that entail? What does this mean?
Yeah, no, ceramic is it's a whole family of materials, and frankly, the curriculum for a lot of the materials engineers from Clemson, it extends far beyond the family of ceramics. Clemson University just happens to be rooted in ceramic engineering history. We have the National Brick Research Center, which we share a building with here at the Research Park, which is a university organization. But ceramic engineering, believe it or not, it is a curriculum that has a lot of history in our country. There's only a handful of institutions left that still keep ceramics near and dear to the curriculum and the history and the heritage. But that's one of the reasons Tile Council, before we moved here in the 90s to Clemson, used to be at Rutgers, which has a strong ceramic engineering program, or at least did at one time. Alfred is another one in Ohio State. So yeah, it exists, believe it or not. And I guess, for me, it was either tile or toilets. So I picked tile.
That is so interesting. This is how my brain thinks, Bill. So I'm like going, yeah, that's right. Toilets, they're ceramic. I mean, do they ever make toilets in any other material other than ceramic? Is there a reason why it has to be ceramic? Just out of curiosity. This is totally sidebar.
I've seen metal toilets in prison cells, for instance. Maybe not personally, but I saw on social media a tour of Kid Rock's new mansion that just got completed. He has a toilet made of gold. So yeah, I think the throne can be made out of other materials for sure, but predominantly.
Right, I love it. That's hilarious. Well, tell us about so you represent members. This is what I was looking at on your website. You represent members in regulatory, legislative, trade, and environmental matters. So tell us a little bit about how you guys do that and what that looks like.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Maybe I can run through some things we've done recently that we're certainly proud of. We were integral to the development of the first ever product classifications to reduce slip resistance incidents on hard surfaces. So slip fall stuff has really been front and center in our initiatives in the safety realm. So as you can imagine, we're regularly involved with the Consumer Product Safety Commission to discuss some of these issues. On the trade front, there was a lot of news around trade action against China in past years. A lot of our members were involved in those issues and provided some leadership. EPA implementation of embodied carbon provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, which we'll get to in a moment. Pretty much anything sustainability that is really gaining a lot of momentum in the EPA and federal procurement. As far as other issues, we're very much representing our members on things that have an impact in the building and construction world and making sure that the tile industry is relevant. So being at the building code hearings, representing industry to make sure that consumers, first and foremost, are protected by quality standards and that products are appropriately specified. So a lot of representation that is needed by our organization.
Yeah, that just, boy, that opens up so many other questions in that regard, because I can imagine that throughout the decades, and, quite nearly, I guess, a century, since you're saying it's, kind of started back in the 1800s, but just certainly for half a century or more, like how the improvements have come along, as far as like the way that the products that are used in this have come along and be better to the general public consumer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you some examples, and you bring up a great point, Christy. Something as seemingly simple as ceramic tile is actually one of the more innovative building materials that exists. When we think about tiles, if we look into the early 1900s and the 1800s, and then on into the middle of the 1900s, 2 inch by 2 inch porcelain, we've all seen them, or the 2 inch hexes that you see in a lot of the historic buildings, kind of grew to 4 inch tile, which was kind of big. Then it was 12 inch or 8 by 8 tiles and 12 inch tiles, which were big. And then we get into the last decade and a half or so, and tiles got as big as 16 inches, 18 inches, then 2 foot by 2 foot, 2 foot by 4 foot, now as big as 5 foot by 10 foot, and even bigger. So the industry has not only evolved from a technology standpoint in decoration, which I'll get to in a moment, but also just the sheer size of the products has opened up a lot more market opportunity, which frankly extend beyond just what we would call tile. It really is becoming a building solution for cladding, for furniture solutions, for just design and surfaces in general. And not to mention the technology in decorating has just gotten so much better to the point where visual design, but also texture. Sometimes you can't even really tell the difference between real stone, real wood, and porcelain and ceramic tiles. So with this innovation and technology, as you can probably imagine, the market gets way ahead of the standards. So we have to be really careful that we protect the market growth, the market growth opportunity by making sure standards stay up to speed with the products and with the technology, so that consumers will continue to appreciate the benefits, the quality, the durability of ceramic that they've come to know for many years.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So like when you were talking about your members, tell us a little bit about like who your members are. Like, who was it that you interact with in that regard?
Yeah, no, good question. We actually have a very, very broad membership. Our regular traditional membership are manufacturers of tile. Manufacturers of ceramic tile in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So all of the biggest companies you can think of that make tile, they're members of our organization. We also have associate installation material members, which are your grouts, your mortars, membranes, backer boards, those kinds of things. We also have our tile members. Some of the smaller size manufacturers certainly have a place in our association, and we could go on and on with the different categories. But we also have memberships opportunities for affiliated products, such as tools, such as manufacturers of manufacturing equipment, such as manufacturers of other kinds of affiliated products. We also recently added a associated distribution level where if there is a distribution member who really has a clear tie-in to the manufacturing world, in relationships with manufacturers, there's some benefits there too. Additionally, we have affiliated product membership levels, which includes machinery, equipment, maintenance products, cleaning products, and
Wow.
even metal resin tile products. We also have raw material suppliers that are members of our organization. So manufacturers of raw material that are often selling to our other members who make tile and mortar and other installation materials. Those interests are represented as well. So you can see why we say we represent 99.9% of the industry in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It's quite a vast representation. So kind of all of the issues we talked about and ran through, you can see that our members have a stake in for sure and an interest in, and that really the value of our membership is really in the collaboration and the participation and sending representatives at a very high level to make decisions and act on those decisions quickly.
Wow. That's in depth. And it seems like just, from hearing all of this, all the different interactions that all these different entities have to do with each other. The thing that like has impressed me is like, for example, if you were going to put down, flooring as opposed to a tile floor, just all the different technical aspects of what you've got to consider to even put down a floor. And I can imagine why the standards and the training and the information, because if you were to like go about trying to do a floor and you don't know what you're doing, boy, you can mess it up.
Yeah, no, for sure. Installation is the single most talked about issue in flooring, really, but certainly in tile. As I said, the industry really prides itself in durability. Consumers have come to expect durable, quality products. A tile floor, a tile surface is really an investment, and to realize that investment to its potential, it needs to be done the right way. And that's why we're so focused on good installation standards, qualified labor, and all of the things that come into a successful tile installation. But you mentioned some of the other competitive flooring sectors. We're very allied with some of those sectors. Some of those sectors, we have some concerns that, are promoting the ease of installation, and we do have some concerns of the long-term viability of some of these solutions that are being promoted out there by some of our competitors. But the ceramic tile industry will always pride itself in doing things the right way.
So when you say your competitors, who would you consider your competitor?
The biggest competition is in the commercial space with hard surface flooring, and if you can think about some of the synthetic alternatives, if we're looking at LVT, if we're looking at different plank type systems, I'd say that's the biggest market competition today. But there's also a lot of alliances in that competition too. We all have very similar challenges, and we all take pride in working together to minimize confusion in the market as much as possible. So I'd say it's a very collegial competition. In fact, a lot of our members are multi-divisional flooring companies which have interests there. So our goal is to, at the end of the day, be competitive in a way to where the consumer benefits in the long run.
I mean, it's amazing to realize how much is involved with it, with doing these tile projects, these various types that get done daily.
No, you're right, Christy, and that's really the magic to our industry. I'll say I'm very proud. I take a lot of pride in representing an industry that's so collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the whole system. Manufacturers of all parts of the system are stakeholders, and they need to be at the table discussing these important issues. And so it's really, the importance of our conversations stretch far beyond the floor covering itself, and everybody comes to the table, and that's been one of our strengths as an industry and as an association over the years, was convening the major stakeholders of the whole industry.
That makes so much sense. Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about your sustainability strategy as far as your time at this TCNA and what you've done. Tell us a little bit about those aspects.
Yeah, so if you want to bear with me, I'll take you on a walk down memory lane here.
I like it. Let's go.
So, if we look at the early 2000s, really starting in the 90s with the Clinton administration, the idea of sustainability and green building and green architecture started to really take hold. And I think we reached an inflection point in the early to mid 2000s when the U.S. Green Building Council came out with LEED, which started rating and certifying buildings based on their environmental performance. And so if we rewind hundreds and thousands of years, we're the ceramic industry, right? Of course, it's sustainable. It's made from minerals that come from the earth. It's baked in an oven, and it's put in a building, and it can last as long as you want it to, right? There's been ceramic. You think of the number of ceramics museums you go to, and you got ancient pieces, which include the flooring and the building materials. So, this conversation, and I'll be completely honest, didn't really do much for us as an industry in the early 2000s, late 90s, because of course it's sustainable, it's ceramic. What do we really need, to address?
Right.
Well, that kind of mentality, and to be completely honest, a little bit of complacency kind of came out back to bite us in the mid to going into the 2010s, when it's like, that's great, but you really got to have standards, certifications, specifications. Designers, look at products and choose products. They got to be defined by standards, and it's no different for sustainability. So around 2006, 2007, our membership was saying, hey, the industry needs to be at the table with these important sustainability conversations. I flipped through a architectural document or a rating system standard or certification, and the tile industry is not really referenced. You get all these lead points for using carpet with recycled content, low VOC, building products of other types, but the ceramic industry is not really referenced. That's when they said, TCNA, we don't know what we want you to do, but you got to do something, bring
Mm-hmm.
it to the table. And that first something started around 2010, 2011. We had conversations about, well, what do we define, what do we consider a ceramic tile that's sustainable? How do we do this? And the answer was, let's create a standard. Let's get all of the stakeholders around a table. Let's talk about what we agree makes why we feel we're sustainable as an industry,
Mm-hmm.
and what we could be doing to be even more sustainable. And let's write that on paper. And that was the genesis of the Green Squared Standard,
Oh,
ANSI
wow.
8.1. And to this day, we still have Green Squared certification available to that standard. Green Squared is referenced in every major building rating system now for
Mm-hmm.
sustainability. It's recognized by the federal government for procurement. It's also recognized by the building codes. And so then that was the foundation, so to say, of our green initiative as a tile as the TCNA. Um, and then certainly once we had something to bring to the table in these conversations, the industry started to gain relevance and got ahead of the curve with other efforts such as environmental product declarations, where we basically did an industry-wide study of what is the environmental impact of tile, of
Wow.
grout, published those in the form of environmental product declarations, EPDs. Shortly thereafter, and just a few short years ago, we released a similar version, but it's called a material health, or I'm sorry, material ingredient guide, to where we released a report of all the ingredients and what the health ramifications are of those ingredients.
That is so interesting.
And now today, the big issue is carbon, lower embodied carbon. What are we doing as an industry to develop standards to calculate our carbon footprint? So we're definitely very much deep in those conversations with the right players.
What do you think in that time frame of, kind of coming into where they were asking you, how about you guys, what kind of footprint are you leaving and what are you doing? What was some of the biggest discoveries you guys found that you were able to make an impact in that regard?
Yeah. So again, going back in time, but the early days, is recycled content important? Are kind of product emissions and the air we breathe, is that important?
Mm.
Is the proximity of the manufacturing to the installation site important? And so on and so on and so on. And the answer was yes, 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 yes. And so we said from the beginning, it needs to be a find the most sustainable option. We need to kind of look where your strengths are, exploit those strengths, look where your weaknesses are, and set criteria at a manageable threshold that can be met, so that manufacturers and users would be encouraged to continue more and more sustainable solutions. That was one of the early things we learned. More recently, what we've learned is that you got to look at the life cycle of the product.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you just look at the energy it requires to manufacture ceramic tile, it's energy intensive. Frankly, if we just calculate the carbon footprint at the factory level, yeah, there's going to be a relatively higher carbon footprint than competitive coverings. But we don't believe that's the appropriate way to evaluate. If you just look at the cradle to gate impact of anything, you're really not you're selling yourself short, and you're actually not looking at you're looking at an unsustainable solution. Um, so if we look at the longevity of the product, how long it lasts, and how you don't have to replace it,
Mm.
makes the carbon footprint go down. And I get on my soapbox easily about this topic. But one of the analogies I use quite often is finance. So if we look at investing upfront in an asset that's going to last a long time,
Mm-hmm.
your annual depreciation cost is going to be the lowest for the longest lasting product. So the consumer knows it makes sense to spend more upfront, and it's going to be cheaper in the long run. Same thing with carbon. If we incentivize consumers to purchase low carbon footprints on the front end, we're actually incentivizing manufacturers to make it cheaper and weaker. And at the end of the day, it's going to have a higher carbon footprint. So we truly believe that our annualized, or our carbon footprint per year is the best way to look at it and to look at the.
Right. It's a little bit more holistic than just a section of the impact per se.
Yeah, we need to have this conversation early and often, and we're having that because we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for consumers and we're doing what's right for the environment. And we think sustainable solutions over the course of the longevity of a building are certainly what we're interested in.
Mm-hmm. And so this was something from what I was looking at research wise, the green squared. So what I've read here is the world's first multi-attribute sustainability standard for ceramic tiles and installation materials.
Yeah, our Green Initiative Committee has a lot of leaders, a lot of great leadership, and so very very that's a very passionate group. They care a lot about sustainability. They care a lot about the industry, and so it was definitely a pleasure to get that together. It continues to be a pleasure to address some of these hard hitting issues.
Mm-hmm. How would you say, like, if we were to bring it on down to to just the regular, walking into any kind of a home improvement store or consumer, how does this impact that person? All of this work that you guys are doing toward these standards.
So I'd like to believe that a lot of the hard work we're doing, if we're talking specifically sustainability, is making its way to consumers. Now, I will say standards like Green Square are more business to business focused in terms
Mm-hmm.
of specifications, specifying the right products for sustainable building projects. But it definitely touches the consumer because if we look through the supply chain and procurement and products that ultimately end up in the consumer's hands, a decision is made somewhere somehow on what's the most sustainable product for a business, for an operation, throughout the supply chain. And that's really what we're focused on, is making sure that we connect the supply chain and get the right products in the right hands. But beyond sustainability, everything that's pretty much on a shelf that a consumer touches in a big box store,
Mm-hmm.
has been somewhere in the supply chain and met one of the quality standards that developed by the industry. And frankly, these standards their development facilitated by our members, by our association, and all the work we do to agree and disagree on dimensional tolerances, breaking strengths, safety issues, and so forth.
Yeah, that is fascinating because I guess most people would not even know, that is going on behind the scenes with
And
these
there's a
different
reason,
products.
as you as a consumer, if you go to a store and you buy a 12 by 24, there's a reason it can be as small as 23 and 3/4 or as big as 24 and a quarter, and no less or no more. You expect that 12 by 24 product, so that's from a standard.
So tell us a little bit about the recent conference that you were in Washington, D.C. Tell us a little bit about the name of it and everything.
Yeah, so 2024 is a huge year for TCNA and the ceramic tile industry and the flooring industry in general. What we did was we realized a few years back that sustainability is complex. It is challenging for the whole supply chain to know which products are sustainable, how to identify those, what industry needs to be doing, what policymakers and standards developers are doing outside of our industry to require us to perform in a certain way from a sustainability standpoint. Kind of surprised that a summit didn't exist, and just an opportunity to get the whole industry together, not just tile, but wood, laminate, vinyl, carpet, stone, and ceramic, all under one roof, alongside other players in the supply chain, users, specifiers, designers, advocacy groups, policymakers, standards development organization. We all face similar sustainability challenges, but we all have very different ways of addressing those challenges and different expectations throughout the supply chains. That was the birth of, let's get together and form a flooring sustainability summit.
Wow.
Uh, and this year was the inaugural event. It was co-hosted by TCNA, Tile Council of North America, as well as the National Wood Flooring Association, NWFA, the Natural Stone Institute, as well as the North American Laminate Flooring Association. And we also had participation from vinyl companies, carpet companies, and attendees in the room that could speak to those interests. But it was the inaugural event, and the whole goal was to exchange dialogue
Mm-hmm.
and network and be on the same page with the right people to make the right decisions, so that we could mitigate confusion in the marketplace. And the event was a smashing success.
That's incredible. I mean, because to even come up with that, did you guys have to plan it like a year in advance or 6 months in advance, or how
Yeah,
did
we were
this come
talking about
about?
this event even before COVID, so we got
Oh,
kind of slowed down a little bit there.
mm-hmm.
But it's been a vision of ours for nearly half a decade. It was we're going to do this year in and year out. The event was July 17th and 18th, and we had on day one we had an opening. Just to give you an idea of the dialogue, the opening keynote. We had the president CEO of U.S. Green Building Council, USGBC, Peter
Mm-hmm.
Templeton. We had Ms. Cheryl Durst, who's the CEO of the International Interior Design Association. Um, we had uh, we had representation from the Green Building Initiative, GBI, with Miss Vicki Warden. And also on the stage, we had Mr. Alexander Cochran from the American Institute of Architects. So we had, a heavy hitting opening keynote where we talked about sustainability, design, policy, politics, you name it. And that set the stage for more technical conversation on the topic of embodied carbon, where we had representation throughout the supply chain. We had technical panels followed by workshops. Everybody at the summit, the whole goal was we tried not to use the word attendee. We wanted everyone there to be part of the dialogue. So everyone there had the privilege of breaking into workshops where we said, yeah, that's all great, Mr. Keynote. That's all great, Mr. Panelist or Miss Panelist. Here's the reality. Here's what we're dealing with. And so it was fascinating to see the dialogue unfold and where there's synergies, where there's even alignment on initiatives, even where there's agreement to disagree on certain issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's a truly special and with a lot of calls to action. But we did the same thing about human health. We did the same thing about standards and certification. So it was a full one day. And then day two, we went to the U.S. Capitol, to the Visitor Center, and had some keynote briefings from government, from industry, from standards, and so forth. So it was everything we had hoped, and we had a lot of good dialogue.
Wow, that's very incredible. I mean, because I mean, just for someone who has to put together events and stuff myself, I think about the planning and that. And my brain is just like spinning, just getting all of you guys together with all the different topics you want to cover and just the organization of it. So, what to you was like some of the top key findings, I guess, or just what rises to the top in your mind about that summit?
Yeah, we had a whole list of important takeaways. In fact, we're going to keep talking about these in the months ahead. We're going to feature each of the takeaways more in depth. So we do have, if you haven't already followed us, go to the LinkedIn page. We're just now getting it started for the Flooring Sustainability Summit, where it'll be a good platform to get some of these takeaways published and to follow, and also to get information about next year's summit. But the biggest takeaway on embodied carbon, we touched on this a little bit, was the need to really look at the cradle to grave impacts of finishes. Now, if we look at structural materials where you're not really changing out the materials throughout the life of the building, that's one thing to just look at the manufacturing impacts. But if you're looking at products that consumers interact with and change out or don't change out regularly, you need to know what you're buying, how long it lasts, so that you know your cost over time. So you certainly need to know what you're buying, how long it lasts, so you know the carbon impact over time. So that was a big takeaway. The other takeaway, obviously, the need for radical collaboration, radical dialogue, to even if some concepts seem like they're out there and impossible, it's important to get together and talk about them, because some people might not know they're impossible, and
Mm-hmm.
there might be unrealistic expectations. There was a need for keeping things simple because this a lot of, and I'm sure you can kind of relate, a lot of the things we talk about, frankly, they're complex in nature. So we all often are guilty of talking to ourselves, training ourselves, but not the people that need to be taught to, the people that need to be trained. So on sustainability, that was a takeaway, was like keep it 101 level for a lot of folks. But again, we're going to continue to feature a lot of these takeaways in the months ahead.
That's a great idea, because I can imagine that the more you even sit down and think about it, Times has a way of like even bringing up, oh yeah, and there's that, and all that,
Yeah,
and that, and how beneficial that will be to just recap all of that for
yeah.
people and have a resource to go take a look at that.
And the important takeaway for us is the flooring industry filled an important space. There are and remain a lot of expectations of the flooring industry. However, the flooring industry has not been very collaborative from segment to segment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at now getting everyone together, we certainly made a splash in DC. Flooring is on the radar now of federal purchasers. Flooring's on the radar of standards developers, so they know who to ask. And that was another important takeaway, was the networking and who the decision makers are. So we were able to get the right players together, so to say.
So were you one of the main players in this, spearheading putting this together?
TCNA was certainly took the lead. It was our vision, and we had a lot of support. I'd be remiss, I should say, to not give credit where credit is due. Without our co-hosts jumping in, we couldn't have made this a true flooring sustainability summit. And without the sponsors, it's not cheap to pull something like this off. So we really relied on the funding. Our title sponsors, Mohawk and MAPE, had a big role in this, but we had a whole list. If you'll go to our flooringsummit.com website, you can get a list of the sponsors who made this event possible.
Yeah, that would be great to check out.
Yeah.
So you have been with TCNA how long? And tell us, where do you started? Because I know that this is your recent promotion. I'm not sure when that happened. So tell us a little bit about your history there.
Sure, happy to. I've been with Tile Council since I was a student. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I joined in 2005 as a ceramic engineering intern in the lab, cutting tile and breaking tile each and every day, and reporting breaking strength numbers and working on. Shortly after that, after I left Clemson in 2006, I joined full time here as a lab engineer, and then as a standards development engineer manager. Then got into sustainability, in 2008, 2009, and starting this past January, became the Deputy Executive Director. So kind of involved in a lot of things here. But so I've been here almost 20 years. Grew up in this area, went to school in this area, and work in this area. That was never the plan, but it's once you've been doing it 20 years, it's really a blessing to be here close to
Absolutely. Sometimes there are callings that are, there for you that you're not even aware of, but as you just do your day-to-day life, your day-to-day contributions in it. This grant that you guys have gotten, I sounded so Southern when I said, let me try that again. This grant.
That's all right. I understood you.
Exactly. We're from the South. From the EPA. Tell us a little bit about this. This is exciting.
Yeah, we're extremely excited. So just to give you a little bit of a background on what this is, it passed, the Inflation Reduction Act passed, I believe, in 2022. I'll have to look back on the exact date, but the Inflation Reduction Act came with a heavy funding package for sustainability. In fact, I believe it was something like 300 billion or something like that towards clean energy and carbon. I know 2.1 billion of that was allocated towards reducing the carbon footprint of federal purchasing and federal construction. And of that 2.1 billion, 350 million were set aside for calculating embodied carbon of building products, kind of what we've been talking about, for the development of more EPDs of building products. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we take a lot of pride in being some of the first adopters, first players in the field of generating these environmental product declarations, but we want to be doing a lot more. We want every company that manufactures, and certainly all the tile manufacturers, but many other manufacturers of related installation materials, we want them to have access to funds to be able to develop these EPDs and be transparent about their environmental impact. Because the more data we have, the more of a difference we can make to lower the carbon emissions associated with the manufacture, use, and disposal of products in our industry. So we applied for funding. We're pleased that we were selected. We're a selectee by the EPA to receive this funding. So the road ahead, we anticipate this to be in a number of stages, which will be, first and foremost, let's make sure our standards for making EPDs are up to date. Let's make sure that all of our existing EPDs have a plan to get renewed, and the funding is there to be renewed. And aside from that, let's make some funding available to manufacturers that otherwise wouldn't have the funds to do so, to run these evaluations and publish this data. So that's the first thing we want to do, and we also want to develop standards for embodied carbon and how we calculate, the carbon impacts from these EPDs. We also want to be able eventually to streamline the delivery of data.
Mm.
Right now, there's a lot of good information out there, but it doesn't. And we touched on this a little bit at the summit, and we also touched on this when we were talking earlier here.
Hmm.
The supply chain tends to be disconnected and doesn't get access to a lot of this good data. Manufacturers invest a lot in EPDs, a lot in sustainability certifications, a lot in education, which unfortunately gets lost in distribution, certainly gets lost, to retailers, gets lost to consumers, and gets lost to the architects, designers, and ultimately the policymakers and standards developers. So we want to be able to create software to make this data more available
Yes.
so that the purchasers have the environmental data at their fingertips once manufacturers invest in these calculation in these assessments.
Yeah, and I can imagine that
Part of
would
the
be,
funding
get
we
your
use for
arms
that.
around that would be very, just even streamlining that information.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we were selected for 2.2 million to help us with all these efforts, and we're in the process now of fine tuning that budget, making sure the right funds are allocated for the right projects, and that we can keep this going for the next several years and continue advancing our sustainability efforts.
That's great. Congratulations, by the way. That's an awesome achievement.
Thank you very much.
So, Bill, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that, or that you'd like to add, or that we haven't covered yet that you would want to say, or?
No, just that we're a very proud industry. I think you can tell. And as you know, there's a lot of really, really good things from a design standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, also from just a standardization
Hmm.
and setting consumers up for success in the future. And so we want to make sure that we promote the industry as much as possible. Um, we've talked about a culture shift for years that's needed. We very much want to see a society that values quality, that values durability. And I think we're getting there if you look at the younger population and even just regular consumer products. Consumers now really, really value quality.
Hmm.
Everything from your Stanley mug to your Yeti cup to you name it. There's a lot of heavy duty solutions out there. We really do believe, or I personally believe, I should say, that society's heading that way to value much more quality, durable construction. So I think this tile industry is set up. If you want to have a look at our promotional efforts to that end and educational, check out whytile.com.
Yes.
That's a great resource to get inspired, to learn about all of the technical aspects of the industry, some of the great work the industry is doing, innovations, but also some really neat design inspirations. So that's our promotional arm, which we didn't touch on too much today, but I would encourage the public to go check that out.
So, what would you, I guess the last question I might have for you, say for instance, there's someone like you were when your dad said, get up off the couch, go get a job, who might not know, you know, what is available. Like to me, I'm a newbie. I'm coming in. I'm pretty gobsmacked about everything I've, been researching and learning about this because it is very, it's much bigger and more vast than I thought. If someone's like, well, around the age you were whenever you got started, what would be some of your advice, or what would you tell them?
Yeah, thanks for asking because I'm passionate about this. That it is an industry with a ton of opportunity. You know, and maybe to a fault of ours, a little bit ours, the industry, maybe we haven't promoted the attractiveness of this industry as much as we should have over the years. When we talk about tile, maybe it doesn't resonate with engineers seeking a 4-year degree in the way that aerospace or medical or others might. But there are a ton of opportunities. But there's also a ton of vocational opportunity if we look at in the installation world. There's a shortage of contractors. There's a shortage of qualified labor. So it doesn't necessarily require a 4-year degree to get, you know, get shoulder deep in the industry right away and to really make a difference. It's a very collegial industry. It's an opportunity to grow your network, meet a lot of great people, see a lot of cool places, and make a difference. I'd say this industry, more than others, has so many entry points, so many opportunities to go straight to the table your first year in work, you can be sitting shoulder to shoulder with owners and CEOs of major companies. So yeah, my advice to younger people would be, if you're technical and you have good people skills, call Tile Council because we'll hire you right away.
I love it.
But there's an influx of industrial growth in the industry. A lot of factories opening up, a lot of factories considering expanding. So there's going to be a lot of jobs there in the factories themselves. There's a lot of jobs on the tile installation side, and there's a lot of unique lines of work. If you like seeing it from the standards and the policy side, there's a lot of opportunities to be involved at a very high level. So, you know, I think that that's my advice: is look beyond just the industries that get the most attention. There's a lot of opportunity in other industries such as our own.
Exactly. And we'll be linking of course, your website, but also WhyTile, so that people can see, just the variety and the different opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us today. It's been an awesome interview.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.